Chapter 14. The winter of the 1882 was darkened by the one cloud in my childhood's bright sky. Joy deserted my heart, and for a long, long time I lived in doubt, anxiety, and fears, but lost their charm for me, and even now the thought of those dreadful they chills my heart. A little story called The Frost King, which I wrote and sent to Mr. Anagnos of the Perkins Institutions for the Blind, was at the root of the trouble. In order to make the matter clear, I must cite for the facts connected with this episode, which used it to my teacher and to myself, compels me to relate. I wrote the story when I was at home, the autumn after I had learned to speak. We had stayed up at first quarterly later than usual. While we were there, Miss Sullivan had described to me the beauties of the late foliage, and it seems that her descriptions revived the memory of a story which must have been read to me, and which I must have unconsciously retained. I thought then that I was making up a story, as children say, and I eagerly sat down to write it before the ideas should slip from me. My thoughts flowed easily. I felt a sense of joy in the composition. Words and images came tripping to my finger ends as I thought out sentence after sentence. I wrote them on my braille stay. Now, if words and image come to me without effort, it is a pretty sure sign that they are not the offspring of my own mind, but stray waves that I regretfully dismiss. At the time, I eagerly absorb everything. I read without a thought of authorship, and even now I cannot be quite sure of the boundary line between my ideas, and thus I find in books. I suppose that it because so many of the impressions come to me through the medium of the other's eyes and ears. When the story was finished, I read it to my teacher, and I recall not vividly the pleasure I felt in the more beautiful passage, and my annoyance at being interrupted to have the pronunciation of the word correct. At dinner it was read to the assembled family, who were surprised that I could write so well. So one asked me if I had read in a book. This question surprised me very much, for I had not the faintest recollection of having had it read to me. I spoke an essay. No, it is my story, and I have writing it for my anagnos. Accordingly, I copied the story and sent it to him for his birthday. It was suggested that I should change the title from Autumn Leaves to The Frost King, which I did, and carried the little story to the post office myself, feeling as if I were walking on air. I little dreamed how cruelly I should pay for the birthday gift. Mr. Arnanos was delighted with the Frost King and published it in one of the Perkin Institution reports. This was the pinnacle of the my happiness from which I was in a little while dashed to earth. I had been in Boston only a short time when it was discovered that a story similar to The Frost King, called The Frost Fairies by Miss Margaret T. Campbell, had appeared before I was born in a book called Beardy and His Friends. Beardy and His Friends. The two stories were so much alike in thought and language that it was evident Miss Campbell's story had been read to me, and that mine was a plagiarism. It was difficult to make me understand this, but when I did understand, I was astonished and grieved. No child ever drank deeper of the cup of the bitterness that I did. I had disgraced myself. I had brought suspicion upon those I love best, and yet how could it possible had happened? I racked my brain until I was weary to recall anything about the frost that I had read before I wrote The Frost King, but I could remember nothing except the common reference to Jack Frost and a poem for children, The Freeze of the Frost. And I knew I had not used that in my composition. At first, Mr. Anagnos thought deeply troubled, seemed to believe me. He was usually tender and kind to me, and for a brief space the shadow lifted. To people him I tried not be unhappy, and to make myself as pretty as possible for the celebration of the Washington's birthday, which took place very soon after I received the sad news. I was to be serious in account of the message given by the blind girls. How well I remember the grateful draperies that enfold me, the bright autumn leaves that wreathed my head, and the fruit and the grain at my feet and at my hands, and beneath all the purity of the mass of the opposite sense of communal that made my heart heavy. The night before celebration of the one of the teachers of the institutions had asked me a question connected with the Frost King, and I was telling her that Miss Sullivan had told me to about Jack Frost and his wonderful words. Something I said made her think she detected in my words a confession that I did remember Miss Canby's story of the Frost Fairies, and she laid her conclusions before Mr. Anagnos. Although I had told her most emphatically that she was mistaken, Mr. Anagnos, who loved me tenderly, thinking that he had been decided, turned a deaf ear to the pleadings of love and innocence. He believed, or at least suspected, that Miss Sullivan and I had deliberately stolen the bright thoughts of another and imposed them on him to win his admiration. I was brought before a court of investigation composed of the teachers and officers of the institutions, and Miss Sullivan was asked to lead me. Then I was questioned, a cross question, with what seemed to me a determination of the part of my judge to force me to acknowledge that I remember having had the Frost Fairies read to me. I felt in every question the doubt and suspicion that was in their minds, and I felt too that I loved friends was looking at me reproachfully, although I could not have put all this into words. The blue present about my thumping heart, and I could sincerely speak, except in monosyllables, even the consciousness that it was only a dreadful mistake did not lessen my suffering, and when at last I was allowed the lead to run, I was dazed and did not notice my teacher's caress or the tender words of my friends who say I was a brave little girl and they were proud of me. As I lay in my bed that night, I wept as I hope three children have wept. I felt so cold. I imagined I should die before morning, and the thought comforted me. I think if this sorrow had come to me when I was older, it would have broken my spirit beyond repair, but the angel of the forgetfulness has gathered up and carried away much of the misery and all the bitterness of those sad days. My Sullivan had never heard of the frost fairies or of the book in which it was published with the assistance of Dr. Alexander Graham Bell. She investigated the matter carefully, and at last it came out that Mr. Sophia C. Hopkins had a copy of Mr. Campbell's Birdie and his friends, and 1888, the year that we spent the summer with her at Bradstone. Mr. Hopkins was unable to find her copy, but she has told me that at that time, while Miss Sullivan was away on a vacation, he tried to amuse me by reading from various books, and although she could not remember reading the Frost Fairies any more than I, yet she felt sure that Beardy and his friends was one of them. She explained the disappearance of the book by the fact that she had a short time before sold her house and disposed of many juvenile books, such as all school books and fairy tales, and that Billy and his friends was probably among them. The story had little or no meaning for me then, but the mere spelling of the strange words was something to amuse a little child who could do almost nothing to amuse herself. And although I do not recall a single circumstance connected with the reading of the stories, yet I cannot help thinking that I may agree for to remember the words with the intention of having my teacher explain them when she returned. One thing is certain, the language was ineffaceable stamped upon my brain, told my for a long time to one knew the least of all myself. When Miss Sullivan came back, I did not speak to her about the Frost Fairies, probably because she began at once to read Little Lord Fauntleroy, which filled my mind to the exclusion of the everything else. But the fact remains that Miss Campbell's story was written to me once, and that longer after I had forgotten it came back to me so naturally that I never suspected that it was the child of the another mind. In my traveling received many messages of love and sympathy. All the friends I love the best, except one, have remained my own to the present time. Miss Canby herself wrote kindly, some day you will write a great story out of your own head that will be a comfort and help to many. But this kind prophecy has never been fulfilled. Fulfilled. I have never played with words again for the mere pleasure of the game. Indeed, I have ever since been tortured by the fear that what I write is not my own. For a long time, when I wrote a letter, even to my mother, I was seized with a suddenly feeling of terror, and I would spell the sentence over and over to make sure that I had not read them in a book. Had it not been for the persistent encouragement of Miss Sullivan, I think I should have given up trying to write altogether. I have read the Frost Fairies since, also the letters I wrote in which I used other ideas of Miss Canby's. I find one of them and letter to Mr. Anagnos dated September 29, 1891. Words and sentiments exactly like those of the book. In the time I was writing The Frost King, and his letter, like many others, contained phrases which showed that my mind was saturated with the story. I represent my teacher as saying to me of the golden autumn leaves. Yes, they are beautiful enough to comfort us for the flight of summer. An idea direct from Miss Campbell's story. This habit of assimilating what pleased me and giving it out again as my own appears in much of my early correspondence and my first attempt at writing, in a composition which I wrote about the old cities of Greece and Italy. I buried my growing description with variation from sources I had forgotten. I knew Mr. Anagnos' great love of antiquity and his enthusiastic expression of beautiful sentiments about Italy and Greece. I therefore, I therefore gathered from all the books I read every bit of poetry or of history that I thought would give him pleasure. Mr. Anagnos, in speaking of the composition of the cities, has said these ideas are poetic in their essence, but I do not understand how he ever thought a blind and deaf child of 11 could have invented them. Yet I cannot think that because I did not originate the ideas, my little composition is therefore quite devoid of interest. It shows me that I could express my appreciation of beautiful and poetic ideas in clear and animated language. Those early compositions were mental gymnastics. I was learning as all young and inexperienced person learn by assimilation and imitation to put ideas into words. Everything I found in books that placed me I retained in my memory consciously or unconsciously and added to the young writing as Stevenson has said, insistently tries to copy whatever seems most admirable, and he shares his admiration with astonishing versatility. It is only after years of this sort of practice that even great men have learned to marshal the legion of words which come flooding through every constantly a new read or die right. Plus sometimes with very much disabled crazy patchwork it used to make when I first learned to see it. This patchwork was made of all sorts of and ends pretty bits of skill of seal and velvet, but the coarse pieces that were not pleasant to touch always predominate. Likewise, my compositions are made up of the crude notions of my own, inlaid with the brighter thoughts and riper opinions of the authors I have read. It seems to me that the real difficult of writing is to make the language of the educated mind express our confused ideas, our feelings, our thoughts, when we are little more than buttons of the instinctive tendencies. Trying to write is very much like trying to put a Chinese puzzle together. We have a pattern in mind which we wish to work out in words, but the words will not fit the space, or if they do, they will not match the design. But we keep on trying because we know that others have succeeded and we are not willing to acknowledge defeat. There is no way to be original except to be bored, so says Stevenson. And although I may not be original, I hope sometime to outgrow my artificial periwet composition, then perhaps my own thoughts and experience will come to the surface. Meanwhile, I trust and hope and persevere and try not let the bitter memory or front of the frosting prevents my efforts. So this sad experience might have done me good and set me thinking on some of the problems of competition. My only regret is that it resulted in the loss of the one of the dearest friends, Mr. Anagnos. Since the publication of the story of my life in the Ladies' Home Journal, Mr. Anagnos has made a statement in a letter to Mr. Macy that at the time of the Frost King matter, he believed I was innocent. He says the court of investigation before which I was brought consists of 8 people for blind for sitting person. Four of them, he says. Thus I knew that Miss Canby's story had been read to me, and the others did not hold this view. Mr. Anagnos stated that he calls his vote with those who were favorable to me, but however, however the case may have been, with whichever side she may have cast his vote. When I went into the room where Mr. Ananos had so often held me on his knee, and forgetting his many cares, had shared in my frolics, and found there persons who seemed to doubt me. I felt that there was something hostile and menacing in the very atmosphere, and subsequent events had borne out this impression. For 2 years, he seemed to have held the belief that Miss Sullivan and I were innocent. Then he evidently retried his favorable judgment, while I do not, for did I know the details of the investigation. I never knew even the names of the members of the court who did not to, who, who did not speak to me. I was too excited to notice anything, too frightened to ask questions. Indeed, I could scarcely did what I was saying or what was being said to me. I had given this account of the Frost King affair because it was important. in my life and education, and in order that there might be no misunderstanding. I had said for all the facts as they appeared to me, without a thought of defending myself